Hi, welcome everyone to another episode of my video tutorials on Laravel, things related to Laravel and other web technologies, to be honest. But this one is focusing on Laravel. It's not one of my usual ones. I have other playlists that have kind of been progressively working, but this is going to be a one-off. And what we're going to try and do is rebuild a website. Now, just some very quick backstory. I built a website for a friend, but for various reasons it worked and it still works today, but it's not really the final product as it was meant to be. So what we're going to do is try and rebuild. This was some years ago, by the way, and I've learnt an awful lot since then. So we're going to try and rebuild it, but we're going to learn a few new technologies along the way. So Laravel is obviously going to be in there, Vue.js for the front end, and MySQL at the back end. And from an infrastructure point of view, we are using Homestead. So I've got Homestead as my virtual server environment here. So that's running Ubuntu. But I've also got the Vue running under a Vite, spelled VITE, environment. So that's running for my front end, which we may or may not get to in this first part. And then obviously we have just the normal command line, which I loaded up my code. So here's just the basic Laravel code. So all I've done here is just let me just clear this out. Okay, so what I've done here is just simply done that. Create code, create project, and called it printers. So you'll notice in my history I had this this one. I actually attempted this yesterday as a recording, and I got so far and then just got wrapped up in my own kind of thoughts. So I do have some of the code already from that, which we're going to cut and paste just quickly. The Laravel stuff. This isn't meant to be a tutorial on Laravel in its own right, or Vue for that matter, but more. The one thing I really want to focus on is GraphQL. It's something I've never used in production, and I'm going to use it in this site. And GraphQL has a server-side element and a client-side element, as you can imagine, because it's like a kind of a replacement for a REST API. So GraphQL is where we're going to focus on stuff, but the Laravel and Vue stuff, we're just going to kind of fly through that. So, if you find it a bit too quick, feel free to play the video at a slower rate, or maybe just pause it when necessary. But the final repo, or certainly the final repo we do here, I'll make available on Bitbucket or GitHub or something, so you can always go back to the code. For the final repo for the actual live site might be slightly different because I am using one paid for product, and the one paid for product is this one. So I've actually bought this. I've bought the license to use this, and all it is I don't know where my login. Oh, I've done it on Safari. That's fine. Okay, so anyway, Tailwind UI is just we'll be using Tailwind, which is obviously a free library, but Tailwind UI is some pre-built components built by the people who did Tailwind UI, and it just allows us to have some quick drop-in components you can just throw in. You can either use them as Vue components directly, or you can just have them as HTML with Vue code plumbed in. So I've got this library, and that will probably be used in the final thing. But other than that, everything else is just freebies. I'm using VS Code to edit. I'm using Insomnia to test out the API. This is partly the result of what I was doing yesterday, but we'll come on to all this a bit later. I'm using something called GraphQL Playground as well, which is going to help us with actually testing out the queries. So because the Insomnia, which is like Postman, if you're familiar with Postman, we're just going to use this for the authentication endpoints, but the GraphQL Playground we're going to use for the actual graph data. So all that's going to come into play. I've got MySQL as a database here, completely blank, so we can populate that with migrations. And let me just go over to my iPad. Okay, so this is a program called AstarPad, I think it's called. AstarPad, yeah, whatever. Nice little freebie. You can buy extras, but the freebie thing works for me. And this is just so that I've been able to data model the models that are going to go into the Laravel app. So most of this is kind of you're probably familiar with. In fact, if I do that and kind of just focus on these, so these are kind of the general things you would have in a normal simple e-commerce site. Products belonging to categories, a product, an order here has many lines. A line belongs to a product. A user can deliver to many addresses, and a user can have many orders and so on. So this bit was probably pretty straightforward. So the only thing that might be a little bit different is this one here. So kind of this section here, the option product and the option, what these are, this is effectively like a many-to-many, and I'm kind of tempted to do this model as like maybe a join table, a join model in Laravel as opposed to just a standard model, like a pivot join, I think it is, something like that. And the same for this one here. So a product can have many options associated with it, and equally an option can be associated with many products. And that's like the template of what you can choose from, whereas this is actually what the customer chooses for their particular order line. So on that particular order they do, that particular product on that order here could have any of those options that were made available here. So that's what this is here, and these are the actual options themselves. So that's kind of the data schema we're going with. Now, as I say, I kind of did this already, so a lot of this we're going to fly through. So this is not meant to be like a novice introduction to Laravel. There's plenty of those videos out there. The Laravel stuff and the Vue stuff we're probably going to go through pretty quick, but we will slow down at the other tech, especially the GraphQL, because I'm very new to that as well. So this is as much a tutorial for me as it is for you guys. So that's it really. That's where we are with the database and the data modeling. So what I'm going to do is, let's break this up into sections. Let's start first of all with the data section. So let's draw a line here. That was an introduction. Let's now start with the database. Okay, so let's put these migrations in. Now, like I say, I've already got these from yesterday, so I'm just I'll copy them in, and then we'll just have a brief chat about it. So these are what I did. So as you can see, I can't show both at the same time, can I? So as you can see, I haven't included the payment one. That's the only one I haven't included here, and we'll come back to that later. I'm not really fussed about that, but everything else is here as a migration. So let's just go through them quickly. So the addresses table, pretty straightforward. Belongs to a user. Orders belongs to a user and belongs to an address. Categories, just a name, because that doesn't really belong to anything, as you can see. Oh, actually, I'm not showing you, am I? Oh. Let's go back. So addresses, straightforward. Orders, straightforward, belong to a user and address. I will add more fields into this as we go along. I was just putting in the relationships for now and some extra, the odd field. Category, that's just a name. Product belongs to a category as a name, but there'll be more to that. Alliance belongs to an order and belongs to a product, so that will be, add more fields added. Options, product, line options, so those two are the two many-to-many joins tables. And then this one, create options, the options table itself. Very good. So that's just some boilerplate code there. As I say, this will all be in the repo, so don't worry if you can't see it right now. So the other thing we need to copy is the models. So again, all the relevant models and all the relationships are in place. The line option, we'll change to pivot, and the option product, change to pivot. So at the minute I've just got has many option products. So what we can do is say public function options, and we can say this belongs to many, and then we say option where are we? Belongs to many option, and then it's using whatever. So just a little note that I customize the name of the table, because when I'm doing many to many I like plural, whereas Laravel defaults to single plural. So it's just my preference that. So in the migration you'll see I've done options plural, products plural. So here we do using, and I think this will be option product. Yeah. So I think options products using option product class. Yeah. So I think that's what kind of this was telling us to do here. Okay. I'm not going to give it an alias because I kind of know what it is. So let's do the line. We can kind of copy this across to the line model. That's line options. So let's paste that. Belongs to many. So line options. So that'll be lines options is the table, and then using the line option class. Line option class, there we go. Good, so that's the only change I wanted to make. Okay, so everything else I think I'm happy with the relationship for now, so we'll leave that as is, and that's the models, that's the migrations. Oh, just need to talk about the seeders. So again, I'll show you what I did yesterday. So you'll notice it gets information from a config file called seeder, basically on a subheading called categories or a key, and then it iterates over them. So this was just a method somebody once taught me how to sort of store seeded information. Rather than storing it in the seeder, you just store it as a config file, and it's just that separation, keeps the seeder nice and clean. So if we go into our config folder, paste that, and now inside our config folder we have a seeder.php. So what we can do now is just add the we go to the database seeder. Now I like to have two files here, or two references in database seeder. Let's get rid of that. So I like to do this. I like live seeder and demo seeder, and the reason for that is I've found live seeder is what's going to be used regardless of what environment you're in. So if like the categories, the products, if you had say the shipping costs for weight or stuff like that, that's stuff you can use anywhere, you know, live, demo, it doesn't really matter. So we call that regardless. Whereas this one, we only uncomment it in demo environments, like test environments, like our local one. But when we push this code live, we just comment that out, repush the file up on Git and deploy it, and then run the necessary files. Sounds a little bit like clunky, but it's one of the easiest ways to do it, especially if sometimes you may want to use demo data on the live site and then you may not want to after you've launched it. So I just find this the easiest way to do it. So we need two more files, live seeder and demo seeder. So let me just copy them. So live seeder, as you can imagine, just calls data we're going to need regardless. So I've done the category seeder and the option seeder. Now I don't know whether I'm actually, did I put anything in the option seeder? No. Okay, so for the minute the option seeder is empty, so I'll delete that out. We'll come back to that later. So that calls the category seeder, which is the one I showed you before. The demo C there doesn't run anything yet, but we'll add some dummy customers and so on a bit later. But for now we have our categories, or we will have once we run the migrations. Oh, that's a point. I need to just check the .m file, make sure we're okay with that. Nothing to note here really, except this here. We'll come back to this a little later. This is to do with the GraphQL that we're going to be doing. But we'll come back to it later. I think I can comment that out. For now, this is just like, other than the stuff we don't need, like the AWS and Redis references and that, eventually we will add some kind of test email account, which I have somewhere. Mail. Oh, I can't remember what it's called. I'll dig that out later anyway. So we have our database. So that's basically everything for the database. So what we'll do is we'll run the migrations. We'll just check that all works, and then we'll close off this first section. So let's go to our Vagrant. So anything with PHP or Composer I run in here. Anything with Node or npm I run here, and obviously we have Vite running there for the client. So here I just do PHP artisan migrate. Because it's the first time, I don't need to do refresh. So hopefully this should just work. Yay. Let's just check the database. And we should have some categories and products. So categories, yeah, we've got some there. Products, yeah, we've got some there. Excellent. Okay, so let's call that an end to the database section. Let's now go on to the next section, which is creating the endpoints for the user authentication. Okay, so we're going to move on to the endpoints now for login, logout, and register. It's just going to be a simplified version. Let's start by creating the controller. So let's just close all these off. Okay, PHP artisan make controller, and then put it into a subfolder of API. Ooh, shaky today. Auth controller, API auth controller. I think that'll do. Okay, so then what I'll do is I'll just copy the contents of each part of this as we need it into this file. So let's bring up our auth controller. There we go. Yeah, completely empty. So let's do a register method first of all. Now again, I'll just copy this from my existing code. Okay, now let's just so we made a custom request validator for this as well, so let me just copy that across. Now again, in PHP you do make request, so let's do it. PHP artisan make request store user request. And if I copy the code, I don't think there was much in this, to be honest. Where are we? Request store user request. There we go. So what we did is we just returned true on this, so not putting any validation on that. And then here, all we're having is name, email, and password. So the criteria for that, pretty straightforward stuff. The name is required, string maximum. The email is required and has a unique constraint on it, and then the password is obviously required, minimum length of 8. So fairly straightforward. If we go back to the auth controller now, we can import that. I'll leave the request in there, the original request in there, because I think we might use that for one of the other ones. But anyway, so we have that as a request value, but we've got this hash here, which is effectively, this here is a substitute for bcrypt, but I've found out that if you use third-party libraries like Argon or others to do your encryption, bcrypt doesn't use them, whereas Hashmate does. I might be wrong on that, but that's what I was told by somebody who uses it, so I kind of have just stuck with it ever since. So what we're going to do is just import that class for hash. And then here, this is just the user model that we're creating the new user if it's successful. So let's import that, app model user. So we just create the user with the submitted details. It should have passed the parameters here in that validation. Once we've done it, we then create an API token, which is basically just a random string that we use to identify through API rather than username password every time, or a cookie. Again, we need to import that class. This is just a Laravel utility class. Creates a random string, saves it to the user. I didn't like putting that, the idea of putting that in the fillable. I don't know, I just felt a bit like insecure. I might be wrong, but I'll just put it in as a separate entry here. And then we just return a response of 200 for now. And if they get a 200, then I suppose what I could do is, if I do try and then I could just put a catch in here, couldn't I? And we could return response JSON, and then we can say or we could say error get message, and then return a, let's just put a 500 for now, but it really should be something a bit more descriptive than that, although they will get the message in the text. So they'll either get a 200 or a 500. Okay, so I think that should work for register. So let's set up our, well, this is what I set up yesterday when I was testing it. So let me just check what I've got in here. Accept application JSON, content type application JSON, and I don't think I had any other criteria in there, and that's just going to /API/register. Oh, the root. Again, I'll just copy this. Okay. So root register, auth controller class register. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think I do need to import this class though. Yeah. Okay, so this should work. Let's have a go. We've migrated the data. Okay, let's have a go. Okay. Column not found. Ah, right, yeah. Because the user migration was already there, I didn't copy in the changes from the code I've done. I just put this in here. And let's run the migration again. So now I have to do refresh. Okay, so now let's try and run that. And we get a 200. We could put more data in there, but for now that's fine, because I'm hoping if we reload the database, there we go, we have a user. Brilliant. And we have an API token, and so that's ready for when we log in. So what will happen is a registration won't log in the user, it just simply creates the user. So it's up to the user now to log in with those credentials that we submitted here to log in. So I've got a login endpoint here. I've got the credentials, the same credentials. Again, I have nothing here of any particular note other than setting it as JSON, so it knows it's a JSON query. So we should be able to run this now and get the token. You can see we got it yesterday when I was trying it, but we haven't set this up yet, the login, so we need to do that. So let's go back to our auth controller. Okay, so again, similar kind of stuff. We don't need that global. So when we log in with the request information, we check where the email equals the username. That's just the default for Laravel username password, even if it's the email. So we check for the username and we check if it exists. Now, I've done a nest and a nest to check if it's correct. I kind of don't like that. I would rather just get my negatives out the way first. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to change this. So if not user, so then that's going to return. I'm going to put a 403 and a 401 if the password doesn't match, only because for the time being I can check which one was called. Eventually I'll make them the same response code, so a brute force attack can't tell if the email was valid or not. But for now I'm going to put them as two separate codes. So that returns a 403. We can then close that off. Then we can say we should have the user object now. So if the password, the send password checks against the stored password, well, we want to say if it doesn't check, so let's return the 401. Okay, so now we know the username matches and the password matches, so we can get rid of those two closings. I just find that much tidier than having nested ifs. I don't like nested ifs. So if user API token is null, so it might be that for some reason the token hasn't been set yet, that's fine. All we have to do is just use the same string method and then save it. If it was already saved, it'll just skip that. Sorry, if it was already populated, it'll just skip that. And then we can return a 200 response with the token. So let's see if this works. So we need to add that to the root. So again, just use the login method from the login URL. Nothing fancy there. Let's see if it works. So if this works, this is the kind of response I should get back. And there we go. So we have an API token. I don't know if you can see that actually. So the API token is 03INT or INI. Let's just have a look in the database. 03INI. Yeah. So cool. So we have our token. So now we can use this token in any other REST endpoints we set up. Well, not so much REST, just API endpoints. But we can also use it in our GraphQL as well, because we still need to authenticate in the GraphQL. So what we'll do, we need to create one more endpoint for the auth. So we'll copy that, and that's the logout. And for the logout, we need to add now this as a bearer token. Okay, so this now is, in other words, you can't log out unless you're logged in, effectively. Okay, so this token, request bearer token, is essentially saying get this here, get this code here. It's the built-in Laravel feature. So then we can say if the user matches on that API token, we can set the API token to null, save the user, and then return a 200, and that blanks out the opportunity for anybody else who may have got hold of the API token to continue using the login. And then as the next time they log in, if the API token is likely to be null, so that gets added. Now I'm thinking if that's the case, we don't need to do this, because at any point they log in, they don't need the API token created here, because it'll get done at the login anyway. So I think we'll just do it like that, and that saves us having to have the extra bit of line. I don't think there's any reason to do this the opposite, as in if it doesn't, and then put the negative, because it's a very small code. But what we can do is just put a 401 unauthenticated in there. So now if we need to put the root in. Okay, so again, same thing, click root logout, and that's fine. However, let me just show you this. Now this will work. I should get a 200 if it logs me out, and it has, and I should have now no API token in the user table, which I don't. But the problem with this is it just means you have to have the API token to log out. And what we're going to find is you will need the API token for numerous other things as well. Now it just so happens that this particular function uses the API token to do something, but not all of them will. So for example, one of the GraphQL requests that we set up may just get a list of things that are not specifically related to the user. So for example, a list of products that are available. So in the method where we do that, we don't really need to check the user's credentials, but we might want to still lock it behind user, that it is a user doing it and not just some random request from outside of the site. So as much as we still want to check it's a valid user, we don't need to use the user in the method. So what we can do is wrap the user check in a bit of middleware so that we don't have to check it here in the method unless we actually need the user as part of that. But there's also another trick we can do to even get around that, but we'll come back to that later. So let's just create the middleware. So let's see, PHP artisan make middleware, and then I've already created it, but I just want to get the name. I'll just call it API token. So API token, and inside there, just a simple check that the token exists in the request. It doesn't have to be correct at this point, but we're going to add that later. For now, we just want to check that it exists. So middleware API token, and again, I'll just copy this code across. So again, it's got this request bearer token, which is the API token. It checks if it's null, and if it's null, it does 401. If not, it goes to the next call in the pipeline, whether it's another middleware or the root or whatever. So this is just simply checking that the root, the token, isn't empty, because if you think about it, if this is empty now, right, I haven't implemented this middleware yet. I've created it, but I haven't implemented it. So watch this. If I now go to Insomnia and try to, I have this method called me, and this method called me simply just returns my details back as a response. Now at the minute, because there's no API key stored in the database, this is going to return some kind of empty or blank message or an error. Oh, sorry, I haven't set the endpoint up for this, have I? So let me just do that very quickly. So we'll create a user controller. So API user controller. So, you know, if we set up a profile page or something, we could possibly use this. But this will probably end up in the GraphQL. This was more just to test the middleware. So we just have a normal request. Let's import the user model. Model user. And it just checks if the API token matches. If it does, it returns me. If not, it returns a 404 not found. Okay. And then in our roots, and paste that. So these three are sort of the authentication ones, and this is just a get information. It's just a get method. It's not a post. Tell me a bit about me. So if I run this now as a query, target class user control. Oh, yeah, I have to import that, don't I? So import class, save that. Okay, so I get a 404 because I've got this bearer token in here, and as you know, when I logged out, my API token, the bearer token, is empty. But if I've done that and gone away and then somebody says, right, well, I'm going to try something with an empty bearer token. Now, I can't remember if I have to empty the whole field. Yeah, let me just put authorization send. Now look at that. I've got nothing in the bearer token, but I've got my details because nothing actually matches what's in the API token here. It's nothing. So it technically it brings it back, and if there was a few like that, it'd just bring back the first one in the list. So what we have to do is create this middleware which says, well, if it does equal nothing, forget it. You're not even getting past that. A user with nothing in the API token needs to log in first. So by trying to use the token to access something, no, forget it. You need to log in. So we could do a return 401. That will probably force the client to redirect to a login page. I don't know. But we're certainly not letting them get past. But what we need to do is implement that. So let's go to here. Let's just pull it in from the same folder, and we'll just call this token, and let me just double click there. That'll be API token. Okay, so we can now, it's still not active, but we have a reference to it now. So now if I go to here, so we've said that this needs to be inside that middleware. So what we can do, let me just copy this across. We can just create a group, a middleware group of API token. I called it that yesterday, but today we'll just call it token, which matches the name we just set in the kernel. And so for root get me is now wrapped in that middleware. So we close that off, done. So what that means is now, if I try to get me, I get a 401. It's not letting me past that middleware, even though null matches null. So that's why we had to introduce that. Now, just as an extra, we don't really need to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to put the logout inside there, because technically the logout needs to have a middleware as well, an API token as well. The slight difference with that is that it actually requests it again anyway. But if that middleware wasn't there, a null login, a null logout would just log out someone who's already logged out. So it probably doesn't make any difference. But maybe I may just want to make sure. So that's our authentication done. I think we'll wrap this section up here for the authentication. And now in the next section, we're going to have a look at maybe some of the basic endpoints we'll need to get the app working. And we'll start investigating and setting up the GraphQL on both the client and the server. Okay, so in this section, we're going to start with GraphQL. Now to do that, I think what we'll do is just install the stuff we need just to get going first of all. Now I had a bit of difficulty with this yesterday, particularly the view side of things. So I've kept the pages here for the ones that worked, but we'll come on to that in a second. We'll do the server side first, which is Lighthouse. So let's go through this. Composer. So the composer's in this one. Publish the default schema, so let's copy that. Okay, so let's publish the default schema. I don't know if this will work in VS Code, but we might as well. Oh no, I think that's something we run live, so I'll forget that for now. Okay, I've got GraphQL Playground, that's this here, so that's fine. Okay, so the next thing, I don't think we need to touch configuration for the minute. but I'm going to publish the config file anyway, just in case we do need to change anything. It's not going to hurt. Now, cause was a bit of a trick. I did run into a bit of a problem with this, and hopefully I'll get this sorted. I think I did fix it yesterday when I did this. I got past this. Let me just check. See what happens. Well, let's just carry on as normal. So let's do the client side now. So I'll leave that there for the minute. Let's jump across to the client side. So make sure you're on this v4, because this was what caught me out yesterday, and I ended up going to the wrong thing, installed the wrong stuff. So if it says you can just use view add Apollo, then I think that works for view 2. But if you're on view 3, which is what I'm on, you can't use that. It didn't work. So you have to do this one. So make sure it says compatibility view 3. And yeah, the view 2 one is a different one there. So let's just install this. So I'll go to my, why is that not loading? Okay, so let's cancel that. So this is the client folder, which is inside the root, the Laravel root, but it's where I created the view template. I don't know if I showed you that at the beginning of this video. I'll show you in a second when this is installed. Okay, so yeah, there. So I was in the root of Laravel, so one folder out, and I just did that command there, and that's created me my view app. So just so you're aware of that. So we've installed Apollo. So what else does it say? Oh yeah, you can use yarn if you didn't see on. So now what I did, let me just check in my other code where I installed this, because it wasn't obvious at first. So let's copy this. Import Apollo client, create HTTP link. No, you can skip this. Now, if you're using the composition API, you're on your own from now on, because I haven't quite got my head around using the composition API with this. I'm going to the classic options API on this one. The composition API, I just haven't fully got how you kind of treat things differently, especially stateful stuff. So let's just stick with the option API. I don't want to get too complex too soon. So we need to add in another dependency. Okay, so now here, yeah. So we kind of need to combine these two things here into one. So you could copy that and then copy that and shoehorn it in, but I'll just show you what I did. Go into main.js, I'll just replace all of this. So what we've done here, these are the lines we've added new. So this is basically an amalgamation of this and this. And then we've used it there. Okay, I've just also hard coded my URL, whatever you're using, stick in there. That eventually should kind of be a process env .env environment, but for now I'm happy for that to be hard coded. We will come back to that. So that worked there, that's fine. What else did we have to do? Yeah, I think we've done that app.use. That's basically what we've done there, so that's fine. I think that was if you wanted to put it in a separate file, which I'm not that fussed for. And I think that's it. So now, how do we use this in a component? So let's just use that user, that me method, because we have it now, kind of, but we're going to create it again. Now, let's just check that that works. So what's happened is, as part of the installation of GraphQL, we have this new root folder here, GraphQL, and this is where we can set up our schema for things. Now, I'll be honest, I'm still getting my head around some of this stuff, so bear with me on this. But you'll notice that there's two queries here that have been set up. Users and user. So in effect, that's like a collection of users. That's why there's square brackets around the user class there. The exclamation mark means it's not nullable. It has to exist. It has to be there, and it paginates. Now I'm going to take out the pagination because I found this problematic. I might put it back in another time, but let me just take out the pagination. But I had to replace it with something. Oh yeah. So what I'm going to do is just do at all users. So let's just check that this endpoint works. So the way we can do that, let me go back to my client here. Let's just do it in the app.view for the time being. So let's get rid of all this here. And I don't want setup because that's the composition API. Not really fussed for the hello world, and I certainly don't want the styles. So okay, very blank app. This will obviously transform as the app goes on, but for now let's just do this. So I want to import GQL from GraphQL tag. Okay, and then we can do our typical view setup of export default. And here we have a new root key to this object, which is a polo. Okay, so that's a key to the object. Now in here, we can now set up our queries that this page will load when the page loads. So let's say we want to get the users, for example. So this is the name of our query. This isn't saying what we want to get at this point. This is just the name of our query. So let's call it users. And now we say query GQL backtick now I think, I tell you what, I've changed this, so let's go to what it says here. Queries. Here we go. Yeah, let's do this first of all. Let me just copy that. And then we'll modify it. So hello is the name of the query, so we're just going to call that users. And here's where the query name, or what it's set up on the server. Now we know that's set as users in the schema. Remember this, users? So that's what we're setting here, I believe. So the query just simply says get users. Now we can test that if we do query users. Let's get rid of this parameters here, and I think we can just get rid of that here. On type query. Okay, no, do we have to query? I don't want that, and I certainly don't want a parameter for the minute, so let's get rid of that. Okay, so this is Graphql Playground. What we've said is we've got a query name, so if we just say users names, we can just call that whatever we want. Users names, enter. It doesn't matter. That's just the identifier for the query. But what it is doing is looking at the users query, which we had in here, and we just say get all users, and we're getting this user here, which is this type here, and this type returns an ID, a name, an email, created that and then updated that. Now let's say, for example, we got rid of email. Okay, so again, this isn't going to make any difference to this because the name is still there. But if I said name email, now remember we've taken email out, could not find email. So let's put it back in. There's the email with the name. Now, you may already start to see the powerfulness of GraphQL here. You can specify what comes back from a user on the server, but when it comes to the client, you can actually choose what to pick from those options in any given query request. In a traditional REST API, it's just default. You've asked for a user, you're going to get all this information, unless you start putting query parameters in, like filter this, filter that. But it doesn't really work. It can be cumbersome and clunky, and it doesn't really work to REST API standards, I don't think, when you start doing that. Whereas with this, you can pick what you want. So you can make your data load much lighter just by simply ignoring the fields you don't want. This is what got it about GraphQL for me. It's so flexible and yet so powerful. So yeah, I think this is going to be a very, very interesting thing. Now let's see if we can get this to work in our View app here. So let's see. So we want to get users. Now I think what we need to do then is we need to somehow get that into our name matching. Please note that a common beginner's mistake is to use the data name different from the field name in the query. So the one before GQL. So if that really should be the same as that. So we've done users. Okay, cool. So let's try this then after the logo. Let's just put users in. Let's see what happens. We'll need to run that again, won't we? So let's just npm run dev that. Okay. And okay, so yeah, this was the other issue I had, was the cause. So how did I fix that? So in config cause, we have these paths. So what I put in here was GraphQL, because all the GraphQL requests are made to one endpoint, unlike REST, which may have nested endpoints. I think that's all I did. Okay, I think we need to reload the server though, so let's just reload the client. Okay, so we've got past the cause issue now. You see, we don't have that anymore. We've just got an error with the query. Now that took me a while to work out what subselection means, but it's actually quite self-explanatory once you realise. What it simply wants is the fields that you want to bring back. So let's go to name, and let's have name and email. Save that, and look at that, name and email. So we've brought back the information from the users list that we want. Now let's say we only wanted the email. Let's just bring that across. Now this is the beauty of GraphQL. Imagine trying to do this on a RESTful API. I want to keep the load light, so I just want email. And there we go. All we get is the email. So if you've not used GraphQL before, literally it's been a week or two that I've been looking at it, so I'm brand new to it, so I'm no expert. I've been watching YouTube videos like you are now, but if you're just looking into it now, I'm sure you can see how powerful this can be, and how efficient and versatile it can be at the same time. I am absolutely falling in love with this almost immediately once I saw what it could do. I do not want to go back to RESTful APIs after this. Okay, so we've now got the endpoint working. So let's wrap it up there for the setting up the GraphQL stuff. We know that it works, but we now need to move on to the next section. So in this section, we're going to start on the site structure, and in this particular part, we're just going to focus on the index page and the cart, because on the index page, we're going to get a list of the products that we want to add to the cart, and then we're going to add the functionality to add it to the cart. So that's what we're going to focus on specifically in this part, this section of the video. Now, I just need to make you aware of a change I've had to make. If I go to the iPad, so what I didn't have was this line here. Let me try and this one. I didn't have this line here when we originally were looking at it, and that's because I forgot that a user can have a line in the cart that isn't necessarily assigned to the order, because if you take that out, the user, it's assumed that every line belongs to an order, but it doesn't if they're in the cart. It belongs to the user but not the order. So we need to add this line in here as a relationship. So what that means is, if we go to our code, it means we just need to change the model references. So if we go to line, a line now do we have a belongs to? Yeah. So let's just copy that. Belongs to user. Belongs to user. Okay. And then if we have the user should have many lines. I haven't copied these across from the failed attempt, any of them. There should be more than that. That should have gone in. They did go originally, but when I was copying from the old code, I forgot. But we also need to put in now this public function lines return this has many line, and that effectively is the cart. Lines that are not associated to orders but are associated to a user. Okay, so now we kind of need to get into the GraphQL, the more of the actual routes we're going to be using. As I said, we'll start with the index route. So yeah, these details. So remember, we got this API token when we logged in, but because we're doing it in Insomnia, we didn't do anything with it, so we have to manually copy it, and then that just gets pasted into there, and then from there on we are authenticated as that user on any requests. So that's the main.js, so that'll be in the code repo for you to do. Make sure you put your own URL in here. Eventually, as I say, that will be made dynamic. Then the other file we can edit is the, just while we're here, actually we need to create the routes. So let's talk about the routes. So I've created a route file. So again, I've already tried this and had to roll it back, but I've left the coding commented. So the important things at the minute are the things that are not commented. So, you know, this stuff here, the home page route here, and the pages.index page that we're going to create. Now again, I've already created that, so we'll come back to that in a second. So then we need to make sure you install Vue Router. So create these, go to your main.js, import router, that's the file we've just created. Sorry, routes is the file we've just created, routes.js. And then down here, put use router there. And that's all we need to do for Vue Router. Then in our app file, app.view, we need to put router view, and that just means that the app.view will always be called as like a wrapper HTML, like a layout file, and router view will inject the specific page that the view router calls. So in this case, for the home page, that's going to be pages index, and that's why when we go to the home page here, we have the word index there. If I change that to, I don't know, we'll just call it home, changes to home. Okay, so let's just save that. So we're in our index page, so we need to put a query in here. The home page is going to have a list of categories and each of the products under the category, and then what the user is going to be able to do is to click the item, click the product, and that will add it to the cart at that point. Once it's added it to the cart, it will then redirect to the cart and query the cart down back into that page. So that's what we're going to achieve in this section. So again, I need to just copy some code out. So 1 second. First thing we need to do in the script tag, import GQL. Then in our export default, we have a new key called Apollo. And this is where we store whatever happens on this page, especially on startup. So we want a list of categories, that's what we said. So that becomes an object key. So in that object key, we can now set various keys. The obvious one is query. So this is now a GQL query. So we say query categories. That's going to return an array of categories, and so we want to get the information from that. So we want the ID. In fact, we don't need the ID for categories because we're not doing anything with that, but we do need the name. Let's just do that for the minute. We need a bit more. Let's see if that works for us. So in here, if I just do see if that injects anything into the page, or if we indeed get an error. Okay, so we need to just check on the server side now that everything's set up. So when you first install Lighthouse, which I think we've already done that, you get this file schema.graphql. I think we experimented with these in one of the previous sections. So we now need to query the create a query called categories, and all we're doing is getting an array or a collection of categories. So square brackets means array, and we're just getting all of them from the database, no filters. Now, although that may look like the model of the database, it's actually this type definition here. So we just need to uncomment that. Now we'll just comment out the products for the minute. All we want is the ID and the name. Okay, let's reload the page. And there we are. We have a list of our categories. Now let's just tidy it up a little. So nice and tidy in an LI. And there we are. Super. Now, but we said we wanted a list of products inside that. So in reality, what we want to bring back here is inside this categories is products. But in order to do that, we have to expose that here. Now, the you know how Laravel knows relationships. This kind of works in the same way that when you've put the word products, it knows that on the category model we have a products relationship. So because of that, this products can sort of get that inference. It knows what it's looking for. So it knows it's looking for a collection or an array of the product type, which again is mapped to the product database model. So let's do that, except again, let's comment out another related object, which we'll come to in a minute. So this products now, it knows the relationship has many, it's the product type, which will map to the product model, and that will now get returned in the response. Now we reload the page, nothing changed. And that's because what we're saying here is it's now available, but it's up to you if you want to use it. So now in the index we can say name, then we can say product or products, but that will error. In fact, I'll show you. And the error is, and this is one you may forget a lot, because I do, it's this: you must have a subselection. And all that means is in the product here, so we've declared the product, we kind of recursively are doing the same again. Which fields are we exposing in the product? Well, we're exposing ID and name. So here I want to get ID and name. Save that. Now we need to reload the page. Okay, and now what we can do is for each category we can do a list of products. So li v for equals product in category dot products, and then if we put the name in there, product dot name. Save that, and there we are. Each category and then each product underneath the category. That returns our product, but we don't need the option yet. We will do in a minute when we come to do the cart, but for now that works. So now what we need to do is make this a clickable link so that we can add this product to our cart. I have a pre-made button here from the previous attempt, so I'm just going to replace this line with the button. Nothing fancy here. Button type button and then a method add to cart with the product ID. So this is just a normal view setup now. Methods add to cart, and we're passing in a product ID. Now, so here we now use the Apollo object in order to create a mutation, and a mutation is when we're putting data up to mutate data on the server. So a bit like an update or a create or something like that. So again, I've already got some of this in place, so I'm just going to copy it. It's not complex in itself. A lot of it is just kind of padded out boilerplate code. Okay, so nothing too big here, but let's just give you the rundown. So this then and catch, if you know anything about asynchronous commands, you'll know what they are, so don't worry about them. If not, then I suggest maybe just get a bit familiar with that, maybe the Axios or fetch libraries. So this Apollo mutate sends this mutation, which is very similar to a query, except you can also well, it allows you to update the information. Now, so we say this Apollo mutation, and then we say this is, I think that has to be the word mutation. I don't think this does. I think this can just be a key. Oh no, because this is inside the mutate. No, I think this has to be mutation. That's mutation. This can be the key. So we're saying add product to cart. Now we'll come to that in a sec on the server. We pass in the product ID, which is what we're passing here, but this is what it's referred to as on the server, product underscore ID, and we're saying we passed the variable ID. That variable is basically that which is what is passed in. So again, don't get too bogged down with the ins and outs here. It comes into the methods here, it gets passed into the variables here, which says let's make ID whatever that was. ID is now referred to as $ID, so we're sending $ID in the mutation, or we have $ID now available to send in the mutation, I should say, and then we call this mutation with product ID, which was that $ID. So I mean, you know, if we wanted to really be verbose about it, we could do that, but it just looks a bit like too much like the same thing, and I didn't want to confuse people. So for me, I just wanted to do it like that, product ID. This is going to send the add product to cart query this ID. These are what comes back after that mutation has been done, because if you go to GraphQL, we can now uncomment that mutation, add product to cart. You see there's the product ID being sent in, but it returns a line. In other words, the line that was added to the lines table, it then returns that lines back as part of that, just to confirm that the information has gone in. So we can save that. That'll return that information here for us to use if we wish. What we actually do is we just redirect. If we don't get any errors, we redirect to the cart URL. But we'll cross that bridge in a moment. So notice here, let's reload that. I might have missed something, so I'm sure it'll flag up. But if we now click this, oh, yeah, I have missed something. Remember before I showed you that we can add a query, lighthouse mutation, sorry. That's what the cart mutation, I don't know if I showed you in this video or not, but lighthouse mutation will create a file in app GraphQL mutations, and then I've named it what the query is. I think that's what you have to do, and just put a capital at the beginning. So add product to cart, and that basically comes in with like an empty thing like that. So what I've done is got the user using the bearer token. That's very straightforward. Created the object in the line. We don't need that. Created the object in the line with the product ID that was sent up and the user ID from here. This, don't worry too much about this at the minute. This is just each product comes with a series of options that it can be associated with. All we're doing is copying those options that belong to that product into the line, because the product belongs to that. The product is now in that line, and that's all what that is. So it's just copying those options into there. We add product to cart. That copies these items, as we said. It returns the line, which is the result of a new line object, which is this line that it's returning here back to the client. Oh, I must keep remembering to flick back away from iPad. So when we go back to the client, this now is items of the line object. That's why we've put them in there. So that'll be the line ID. That'll be the product associated with the line, the user associated with the line, and then the corresponding names. So these are the fields we can choose from to show now back, if we wish, on the front end. So let's try this. Let's reload. Let's add to cart, and no doubt there'll be errors, but hey, there we go. So that's a server error, internal server error. Let's have a look at Laravel. Lighthouse failed while trying to load a tag. Yes, because now we need to start uncommenting all of these. So these types represent the models in the database, basically, to all intents and purposes. And you just got to learn how to do the relationships. So line has many options, products option has many products, and so on and so on. So again, the documentation will talk you through all that. I'm just going to uncomment everything now. Oh, we need to do the user as well. Okay, but that's all what that is. And let's undo the cart. So let's try that again. Now let me just check if the database actually worked that time. It did. It actually did put stuff in the cart. So let's truncate the tables this time, and then add it to cart. So there we are. That has worked. This is the data it returned, which, as you can see, is the line data, because we have an ID, line 1, a product that we picked, and me as the associated user. If we go to the line table, it's product ID 1, user ID 1, which is me, and the actual ID, which is 1. So the data worked. It added it to the cart. The problem here is just we haven't set up the redirect to the front end cart to view it. So we can do that very quickly, because again, I have that information to hand. So in fact, we commented that out, didn't we, in the client routes? So we can now say cart, comma, import cart from pages cart. Pages cart. We'll do that in a minute. Okay, that's it. We just need to now go to source, pages, new folder. The cart folder is going to hold like the shopping cart, the payment details, so as well as the cart itself. So that's why it's like a subfolder. So cart view. So let me just copy over what I have in my cart file here. So we have, it's basically, this is just a query on this page. So we let's close that down there. So if the cart variable has been set by populating it from the server, we loop for each line in the cart, show the product name, and then the options, which I said earlier were commented out. Now don't worry too much about this. This is something I'm toying with, so we'll come back to that later. So here, here's the query, the GQL query. So remember, we put it in Apollo. It's called cart. The query is called cart, which is related to this here. And what we get back is an array of lines. So for each line, we want the product and the options. Again, don't worry too much about the options for the minute. Don't think we need that. Oh yeah, we do. Option name. Well, we need the name. I'll leave it all there for now, but I'll explain this all out later. The important thing here is the name. So the result is what happens after it's got the query. Now the reason why I put this in is I didn't want to just dump it straight to the template. I needed to get the data, and that's because I needed to initialize an object, which is this options, which is this here, so that we could store the customization stuff of that particular item in the cart, because we need to be able to customize it. So that's what this is here, which we'll come back to this a little later on. So again, don't worry too much. There's a lot going on, but actually a lot of it is just specifically to what we're trying to do, not the Apollo kind of setup. So then this is all to do with those things in the template, trying to set up arrays and that. So again, forget all this. We'll come back to that in a bit. So now that we've got these, let's reload the page. And we should be able to add an item to the cart, which we know we can do, but it should redirect us to the cart. So let's add this one this time. And there we are. It's redirected us to the cart. That's the product name for that line, the options that that product has, and then we've just added the second item, and that's added the options that that has. So that is now added. We've added the item to the cart, so we've managed to do a query of categories with products. We've managed to create a mutation that adds a product to a cart, and then we've created another query which brings the cart data back into the cart page. Now I just need to go over that a little bit more, because you notice there's no decorator at the end of this query, the same as there was no decorator here, and that's because as this went to a separate PHP file, so does this one. So this looked for a query in the Graphql folder called cart. So let's see if it's there. So app, Graphql, queries, cart. That's what it looked for. And all we did here was get the user, and then we just returned all lines that belong to that user that have not yet been assigned to an order. That would be what is in the cart. So I hope all that makes sense. There's an awful lot. It took me, I mean, this is my third attempt at recording to try and explain it, but that is kind of what we're looking at here. Watch the video again if you're not sure. Pause it to look at the code at specific points, but you should kind of see the connection between the back end, which is View Apollo, and this front end. This page is so important to make sure you get this right with the different things in here. So just remember, as far as I can tell, if there's no decorator here or here in either the query or the mutation types, what that means is that there should be a corresponding PHP file in the app GraphQL folder. And there we are. We have our items in our cart. So in this section, I was going to carry on with the the GraphQL methods, queries and mutations that we would have needed to complete the site that we're building. But I kind of sort of thought back to the very beginning, and the idea, other than actually building the site, the main idea of this video was to teach how GraphQL could be incorporated into a Laravel site using Lighthouse and View Apollo. And I was just kind of thinking, now we've kind of done that now. You know, we did API endpoints for the authentication, but then we did a query for the cart, and we did a mutation for the add to cart. So I know there's a lot more to GraphQL. I mean, we've still got to do things like image uploads, image downloads, or document uploads and downloads, or whatever, which will be as part of this website. I have to do like PDFs and whatever. But generally speaking, or at its basic level, we've got it working now. So what I'm going to do is, rather than just continue on with one big video, I'm going to end this video here as video one, and then you've got enough here to kind of tinker for yourself now with if you want to do your own thing. But what I'm going to do is I'll produce a video number 2, which will be the continuation of the building of the site. So if you want to actually see the site in its entirety, then you're more than welcome to watch that. So I'm going to post the GitHub code up now, or the code now, probably to GitHub. I could do GitHub or Bitbucket, but wherever it is, I'll make sure it's in the description of the video. So you can see where we are up to now, and then what I'll do is I'll create once I've done the second video, I'll create another branch, and you can pick which one you want. So I hope this has been educational. It's certainly been educational for me, learning how to put GraphQL into a site. It's been quite exciting, a little bit difficult at the beginning of that, just when I was getting used to it, but it just seems to fall into place really nicely. I'm really excited as to using this going forward in future projects. I'm already starting it on another project. I've already incorporated it into another Laravel site. So hopefully you found this educational. Please like the video if you did so, and obviously if you want to see more videos like this, feel free to click the subscribe button so that you don't miss those videos as they come out. But for now, thank you very much. Look out for video 2, or if not, look out for videos from my other playlists, which should be coming soon.